Hey friends, I'm sorry I kind of just woke up, so pardon the hair and the suit is just 'cause if I do political content, I want to be wearing a suit. Um, I've been wanting to put out videos, and I wanted to put out this video 'cause I wrote an essay last semester, and so for the essay I had interviewed a professor of political science, and I'm asking him some pretty tough questions, and it's a pretty decent conversation. It's really long, so I don't expect you guys to watch the whole thing, but it's just interesting if you guys are interested in that. I kind of want my YouTube to reflect, all my interests, and kind of the progression of my interests. So, I hope I'm kind of demonstrating a bit of increase in my productivity or at least my woodworking skills um, for politics. As I get more into it, I'm gonna try to push myself and maybe have some debates or whatever that might be on this channel. And then, my gaming, I might post another gaming video soon. So, keeping it really true to who I am and just kind of keeping it mixed just for fun. I don't expect, anyone to really sit through this whole video. So, hopefully, you just enjoy watching and listening to me talk about my life. Um, but it's a good video. I think I pressed him on a lot of um, interesting topics. We talk about automation. We talk about the future of late stage capitalism. We talk about the issues within the environmental crisis and that effect on capitalism and global economics. So if you're interested in any of that, maybe stick through and watch some of the interview. Um, but yeah, I hope you guys enjoy and try to cut him some slack because I'm asking him some pretty tough questions, and I know I sound nervous at the beginning. Obviously, it was like my first time doing an interview with a professor or anything of that caliber, so I was pretty nervous. But I think later on we kind of get a nice flow going, and we shoot some stuff back and forth. So I hope you guys enjoy. It's good seeing you guys.
A good or safe thing to have in the world, but we have them, and I don't think there's anything that China could do that the United States wouldn't do. I guess it makes it more dangerous when we have multiple superpowers that are. If we go back into an era where there are several very powerful countries competing with one another, that's anxiety inducing, but there's nothing about it being China. I would feel the same way if Germany or Canada or Brazil was, if Canada suddenly announced it had a nuclear arsenal and was a global superpower, then it caused the same amount of anxiety. Not that Canada would be in any position to do that.
Okay, so now we're going to shift to automation. I want to specifically focus my essay on like the job sector, specifically in America, but we were just talking about China. So what do you think of? Do you know anything about like China's social credit system and their way of tracking the people that live in China?
Not much. I don't know any of the specifics of it. I know there is something called the social credit system, but I have no idea what that actually entails for somebody living in China.
It's crazy, like, if you speak up against the government or if you say anything against the government, like, you can be barred from travel, you can, like, be restricted from certain regions in your city. It's crazy. I mean, they don't have it implemented across the board in China because there's too many people right now. Yeah, it's getting to be more and more. They have cameras almost everywhere, and they track their people. And we see that with the this is a statement that might not be true, but with the development of technology and AI, the functions to control people are becoming more and more readily available to countries like China, who won't hesitate to implement them upon their population. Would you be worried? And this form of control and authoritarian state function, I guess, is proving to be extremely productive. And it's, in my opinion, kind of the next stage of capitalism. a form of capitalism, authoritarianism, and China calls it communism, but it's obviously not. Do you think that could happen in Western countries?
So, a couple things. China gets talked about a lot as having like super advanced intelligence apparatus for like internal intelligence apparatus, but there's some there's reasons to doubt how high quality the information that they have about the people living in their in the country actually is. Let's see if I can find. There's a paper that's been written about this. I don't remember if it was about the social credit system specifically. Let's see. I'll have to look for it later. But these authors find that they were looking at like Weibo posts. Weibo is like kind of analogous to like Twitter or Facebook in China. They were looking at Weibo posts of dissent and then how quickly they were censored. It's been a while since I've read it, but basically they find that the government actually wasn't particularly good at censoring it or at knowing who was posting. And I really do not remember the paper particularly well, but there's reason to doubt that they have this 1984 style hyper advanced security intelligence apparatus. I mean, I would not want anything like that in the country where I live. Obviously, all else equal, I would prefer that not exist. But I think most of what I hear about that comes from American Reddit posts and stuff, where I'm just kind of skeptical of how big and scary it actually is, since you're hearing it from a geopolitical adversary, and we want to drum up fear of China or fear of Iran or whatever. But I mean, the UK has a pretty similar CCTV surveillance system, and I don't know what else the UK does, but their ability, if you're in London, you're being seen by 1 to 12 different CCTV cameras wherever you are, basically. And so I don't disagree that that's anxiety inducing, but I don't think it's unique to China, and I don't think it's as serious is maybe not the right word, but as all powerful as maybe China wants it to be seen as, or as people in the United States want it to be seen as. I mean, we have the PRISM revelations and all of these things. We're doing similar things. It's hard to compare scales because there's so much secrecy on both sides, but I think probably every wealthy country is doing something that more closely resembles the Chinese surveillance apparatus than we would like to think. I'm kind of agnostic on it. But I'll find the paper that I was thinking of and email it to you.
Awesome, yeah, thank you. Okay, so now more of a automation concerning jobs in America, with Andrew Yang kind of running on the idea that automation will bring a new wave of whatever he called it, and I guess a new wave of jobs, or of loss of jobs. There's one article that I think I read a page of for this essay, where they talk about how for the first time there's a net loss of jobs through kind of I don't necessarily know how to explain this, but with new jobs emerging, or with new forms of production emerging, there's a net loss of jobs, and that there's a sufficient amount of studies proving that this culling of low skilled jobs might displace a very large number of people, And like I've read an interview, or I listened to an interview with an MIT professor who was saying that, that is still kind of far from now. I mean, he said 20 years, which doesn't seem that far, but
it's not particularly far. It takes a long time. If we're talking about political responses, that's, tomorrow.
Yeah.
So my sense is, and I know that there's a lot of disagreement about just how much automation will change the job market or cost people their jobs. I expect it will probably, just my intuition about these things is we're pretty good at automating things, and there's no reason to think that we'll get worse at automating them, and it would also be less costly to prepare for a world where it's hard for a human to get a job and then have it not happen than to not prepare for that world and suddenly everybody is unemployed and we have no safety net for them. The Yang idea of like $12,000 a year for everybody is not really my preferred solution, because I don't think that addresses some of the more underlying issues like medical care. Like if I have a chronic illness, $1,000 a month is not going to mean the same thing to me as $1,000 a month for someone who doesn't have a chronic illness and can do whatever they want with it. If I don't also have healthcare, something like that. So I would prefer to see a more decommodifying of these necessary things like housing, healthcare, rather than just a lump sum of money. But I like that he was talking about automation, and he really did introduce the idea of a UBI, or of like, hey, it's possible that everyone loses their jobs in the next 20 years. He brought that into the conversation in a way that I think will last a while, and that's positive to me.
So you would say that you don't think regulation will hit automation at any point? You think automation will kind of be carried through on like a for-profit basis?
Yeah, so what do you mean by regulation? Limits imposed?
Limits imposed on what can be automated, or what jobs can be replaced. Like self-driving cars are becoming pretty common, and like the possibility of like trucker jobs going away is coming around soon. But do you think that, I mean, let's say that the truckers lose their jobs, but after like two more sectors lose their jobs, do you think that then the government will stop automation? Do you think
so the problem, the like really frustrating thing about automation is that if our economy was structured differently, this would just be a good thing. If we no longer have to do, somebody who's doing a long haul trucker job, it's like didn't have to do that job, but the productivity is still occurring, and probably getting more productive because the automated truck never has to stop. Like that should just be a great thing that everyone is excited about. But since the people who are employed by these companies have no say over what happens to the company, it's not like if you lose your job as a trucker to an automated, to a Tesla super truck or whatever, it's not like you still get the productivity from that truck because you have no stake in the company. You're just fired. And so the people running the company are making more money than they ever have because they're not paying you, and if they're more productive. But the economy as a whole is screwed if everyone loses their jobs and there's no safety net. I don't think, since there's no, there aren't like workers on corporate boards. There's no like mandate to have workers on corporate boards, or for businesses to be some kind of like cooperative owned by the people employed by the business. There won't be an incentive for the people who are making these kinds of decisions for the companies to not automate. I don't see any world in which there's like limits imposed on the amount of automation, because that's not the ideal solution from anyone's perspective. It would be less productive than keeping the automation.
But you'd be fine. It's not going to be like awful.
Which would be worse for the owners of the company, and it's like having a stake in that newly automated company would be better for the workers than getting $1,000 a month. So I don't see where the incentive to limit automation comes in, as opposed to mandating some amount of worker control over the company, or like some kind of dividend that could be paid to workers who lose their job or something like that. So it should be cool. Like, hey, we don't have to do these shitty jobs anymore.
That's exactly how I start that paragraph. I'm kind of trying to say, like this is going to be bad, but it shouldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
And there should be a way around it. So you mentioned workers' co-ops, and I want to get to that, but I want to finish automation first. So just keep that in mind. Do you know anything about Singularity? I mean, you were kind of...
Yeah, so the Ray Kurzweil thing,
I don't know names too well.
He wrote, I think he was the guy that came up with this idea that technology is increasing, computers are getting faster and faster and faster, and eventually, this the curve of how powerful our computers is basically vertical, and then at that point something crazy happens and we have a sentient AI that fixes all of our problems, is kind of how he sells it. I don't think that's particularly likely.
Do you think that could be a good thing, or do you think we should avoid that at all costs?
I mean, it could be a good thing. It's like, seems so unlikely to me that I don't know how to think about what it would be like if it did happen.
Because I definitely think it's a pretty theoretical question, but the conversation I usually like to have is if no one is working, and some people might say that's a great thing, no one has to work and everyone can kind of do whatever they want to do. But if that is the case, with like more emerging forms of control and forms of, I guess, wasting time, do we risk kind of losing our humanity and our culture?
People find stuff that they like to do. Yeah, I think people. That's a really common argument against like UBI or automation, or if not argument against, then like a concern that people raise. And there's probably something to that, but I just find it hard to believe that people wouldn't just think, shit, I'm bored, I should, learn how to do woodworking, or, write a book that I've always wanted to write or something, or go back to a university and that's, now freely available to me because robots are producing all of our goods. I don't think that would be a particularly devastating thing. I can't imagine I have free time to do my hobbies now would be worse than, damn, I have to spend 40 hours a week working at Chick-fil-A for minimum wage or something. I think sometimes that argument is employed kind of disingenuously to throw people away.
I mean, I definitely agree. I'm always brought back to that, kind of just portions of that other argument, just because I see my roommates, or I see the kids around me who wouldn't kind of try to find something, who would rather just sit in their room playing video games. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they'll find something eventually, but I know from now that they wouldn't, and that they would love to live a life of doing nothing.
Yeah, well, I also think that's just fine. If there's not work that needs to get done, if you want to, if you want to just play World of Warcraft for Fortnite for 12 hours a day, I think that's if that is actually what you want to be doing, I think that's a completely fine goal to have. I don't think I think fewer people than a lot of people think would actually end up doing that, at least indefinitely. But
I mean, and yeah, as you said, as long as that stays a few people, I think like we risk losing like social values or social tendencies if that becomes a majority. But right now it's not looking like that. And as you said, like so be it. Like if that's what they enjoy truly without like exterior motives, then
And people are, fairly good at doing things that they enjoy doing. Kind of by evolutionary design, you're more want to do things that you like than that you don't like. And if you get sick of sitting around playing Apex Legends for however many hours a day, then you probably go outside and hang out with a friend in real life, and there's an equilibrium to be found there.
Definitely. Yeah, so we kind of danced around most of the questions that were coming up after. I was going to ask if our only option is to keep pushing technological innovation, or if we should try to halt it in any ways. And then I was going to ask if you think genuine Bloodiedism is wrong or unavailable. Because I have like kind of polarized opinions on where, and we were just kind of talking about this through people playing video games instead of studying culture or being with their communities, and like we do see a decline in community involvement in America, and in more neoliberal westernized societies, and I see that in a sense as an issue. Some people might not. I don't consider myself a fundamentalist, but some fundamentalist values are appealing. Do you think it's too far gone? Do you think like the West has overtaken too much of the prospects of, I guess, community values, religion, and fundamentalism?
Like it's taken too much on, or has lost
Too much of that?
No, I think it's fine from that perspective. Like there's a book, Bowling Alone, Sarah?
Yes.
Putnam, yeah. Yeah. And it's like, it is a problem to not have an outlet, like a place that you can go to talk about, to just like, be with people.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that needs to be like church or something. I'm not concerned about like the decline of like European culture or anything like that. I think if more people had more free time, they would join clubs doing things that they like to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd get the same social interaction from that as you would from the church. And I think we've done a pretty good job, even in countries where religiosity is like declined, like France, that's now like 80% atheist or something. They've preserved the history of like European Christianity very, very well there. I don't think there's anything. I have absolutely no concerns about declining Western culture or anything like that.
And I think for this part of the discussion, I think we're too focused on kind of far into the future ideas of what will happen to society. Strictly speaking of now, with the decline in religion in America, because I do agree, I think France has a great kind of preserving of its culture and its history, and that kind of allows for it to kind of be in the background of everyone's lives. Like walk around France and everything's just so beautiful. With some people, like they point to the rise in suicide in America and opium addictions directly to the decline in religion and Christianity. Do you think that should be compared?
Well, there's just so many things happening concurrently with that. I mean, you could point to like any social trend that has followed that. I'm assuming like probably from like the 40s to the present era, religion on average has been declining. Like levels of religiosity have been declining. Is that approximately?
I don't know. My figures are kind
Yeah,
of just...
yeah. Like presumably over the second half of the 20th century, people are getting less and less religious, but also there's just so many trends happening alongside that, and I don't think you can isolate like, religiosity or lack of religiosity as the thing causing like suicide or drug addiction. I mean, in some people, maybe, sure, but there have been economic downturns and like wage stagnation. It's just a lot has been happening in the United States while religion has been declining, and I don't know how you draw those like causal lines. And even if religion was the thing, people not going to church anymore was the thing that's causing these suicides, if you could show that definitively, then there would still be an argument to be made that like, well, it doesn't necessarily have to be religion. It could just be not going bowling with your friends and moving out to the suburbs and these kinds of things are what's driving that isolation. I'm hesitant to think that there's anything like unique about like religious social interaction compared to just any form of non-work social interaction.
So, before my last question, I want to go back to workers' comps or co-ops. Are you familiar with Richard Wolff?
No, the name is familiar, but I don't know.
He's like one of the few proclaimed communist economic professors in America. I think he teaches somewhere.
Most professors do.
Yeah. Well, he proposes an idea of instituting work. I think he calls it like workers' democracy.
Workplace democracy.
Are you familiar with that? Do you have an opinion?
Yeah.
On it?
So that's like. That's like the kind of either worker co-ops or it got talked about a little bit in the presidential campaign with like should workers be allowed on corporate or should corporate boards be required to have seats with worker representatives, and the idea I think is just to say, okay, well, the government is not the only entity that has power over people, and regardless of how much we've curtailed government power over your individual life, if you work for Walmart has an insane amount of power over you, and so you should have some say in the running of Walmart or whatever your place of employment is. I think that's a good, generally, broadly speaking, a good idea and a good distinction to be made. On the right, that gets lost. That you talk to libertarians who are very worried about government overreach, but then there's just essentially no discussion of the power that non-government entities that you didn't choose to live with, like all of the mega corporations in your country, have over you. I think it's good to say, hey, the government is not the sole arbiter of power or force in the country.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I don't necessarily agree with Richard Wolff's plan, because he wants to give equal jurisdiction to every member in a company. Like everyone has the same vote, and everyone votes on specific things, like if you're gonna split in the market, or if you're gonna go bankrupt or sell, or whatever it might be. And I think some people just aren't fit to make those decisions in a company. Like I work at Jimmy John's, and I don't think my coworkers should be making
So you work at the one on
Game Street.
a bunch of my friends opened at that shop as bike delivery people, and I am inclined to agree that I don't know if the manager or Fitz be making this. I think that's a fair point, but I guess the selection process for how you get to be in a position of power in any institution, I'm not sure that does a good job of like actually selecting on the traits that you would want a leader to have. It selects people who are good at moving up in some kind of ladder, but it doesn't necessarily select people who are good at making decisions once they're there. And also, if you're putting forth some policy proposal, like every worker should have a right to vote in the goings on in their country. If you start from the most extreme position, within reason, if I'm a politician and my single issue is to get that plan passed or something resembling the Wolf plan for workplace democracy passed, if I can get elected on the most extreme version of that plan, once it goes through the process of going from a plan that I'm campaigning on to a plan that's being voted on to a plan that's being signed, that has moved significantly away from where it started. There's bargaining that goes on when you're actually writing a bill and voting on a bill. And so if you start from a more extreme position, there's an argument that you'll end up in a better place from your perspective than if you start at the compromise position. Something like Obama gets criticized on for running on the Republican healthcare plan and then making further compromises, where if he had started saying from the get-go, we're going to do single payer, we're Medicare, if he'd run on Medicare for all and gotten elected on Medicare for all, then maybe after all the compromises it might have looked more like the original Obamacare plan with the public option and all that. So there's, as long as the plan isn't so insane that no one will vote for it, if you're trying to get something passed, I think it's generally good to put forth a more extreme version than what you expect to actually end up with, because you're not the only one making decisions once you're in office. But also with everybody voting, I don't think they'd come to decisions any worse than if you there's a book about public opinion. The macro polity is what it's called, and their argument is each individual voter isn't making very good decisions. We were in the same American politics, so each individual voter isn't necessarily making the best decision from whatever perspective you're looking at it from, but the errors in their vote, if we're just talking about I want to vote for a policy that will make me wealthier or make you poorer or something, the people who are voting for a policy that they should be voting against from their self-interest are on average about the same number of the people who should be voting against it but are voting for it. It's often just kind of randomly distributed, so the error is the same in both directions. So on average, each individual might be making a weird irrational decision, but on average the correct decision is being made. And so with workplace democracy, if everybody's voting on it, you might actually end up with a better end result than if just one person who has climbed their way to the top of the Jimmy John's leadership is making those decisions.
Oh, I can't wait to quit that job. Hopefully it's coming.
It's a popular sentiment among people who work at the Gain Street Jimmy John's, I think.
I mean, I love the environment. Everyone's great there. It's just a lot of work, a lot of biking. Yeah. So I have this stupid theory that I think that we'll run out completely dry of resources before we get anywhere near complete automation or anything good. I'm very pessimistic of our future. As a country and as a world.
Lots of that going around right now.
Yeah. I'm not too worried about the coronavirus. I think it's all a bunch of hooey. It kills.
It's not going to kill any of the people in this room, but
Speak for
It's gonna
yourself.
strain it's not gonna kill you. It's
I mean, I can only hope.
I mean, part of the problem is that like it's not particularly serious for most people,
Mhm.
so it spreads like other like SARS or something just like kills you in a week, and so
Yep.
you don't, and you know immediately once you start showing symptoms like, oh, things are bad, and you're not going to the mall or going out to eat or going to CPAC or anything like this. But with this, it's kind of like a bad cold to a really bad cold. Symptoms wise, and then it kills you, so people are just like going around spreading it everywhere, and it's probably not going to kill that many, it's not going to kill like a huge chunk of the population, but it'll strain the medical, so, the hospitals in Italy right now are like very, very, very taxed, and like elective surgery, I was reading earlier today, like there are hospitals that have just suspended all elective medical procedures because all of their doctors, regardless of their subfield, are just having to tend to coronavirus patients. And it's not going to end life on the planet, but could make daily life a little bit more stressful and dangerous than it is. Just does kind of lay bare some of the problems with it. It's not going to be the thing that tanks the system, but all the talk of, well, we can't possibly make this vaccine free, when it was just starting to be concerned for the United States, it just really hits home a lot of issues that we're dealing with right now. We're going to charge people like $200 for a vaccine that...
Yeah. Bernie Sanders tweeted out this morning something saying like, once the coronavirus is a vaccine is made, it will be free, something like that.
Yeah, I think regardless of who's president, probably would be, because I think most people, if we're still thinking about coronavirus in a year, people are going to be very scared of coronavirus in a year, and there will probably be adequate demand that regardless of who the president is, we get a free vaccine. It's just kind of frustrating that we have to have that conversation at all.
Are you pessimistic or optimistic about our near future? Well, let's say 20 years.
Fairly pessimistic. I don't think we're going to do anything about climate change until it's too late to do anything about climate change. From the perspective of, by the time we start doing something about climate change, daily life will be significantly different from what it is now, I'm afraid.
Do you think it'll affect the West that soon? Because I'm worried about third world countries, and then I think once third world countries are being affected on like a global scale to such a degree, I think then there'll be an adequate response.
So I'm just worried about what that response is going to be, because if we see like a lot of immigration from poorer countries, we had a relatively, compared to what it would be if we had large scale like climate migration, like the Syrian refugee crisis, combined with an economic downturn, basically like led to a little miniature fascist revival in Europe for 5 to however many years it ends up lasting. And if the shock that's relatively small compared to what a shock from widespread climate migration can have that big of an impact on a region, fairly pessimistic about how we would respond to like what is the border going to look like if more and more people start like fleeing rising tides in South America. What is Europe going to look like when the same thing starts happening there?
Especially with the right populist movements in Europe.
Yeah.
Which you hinted at with the fascism. But yeah, it's scary.
Yeah, it's like I think we'll feel the political impacts of climate crisis before we feel like actual before like people in, well, say that, but if water levels are rising, Florida is at like 5 feet above sea level or something, like people are moving off the beaches for sure.
Yeah. I kept telling my dad we should move to New York. It's been too long since I've been saying that.
Yeah, well, and honestly, so Were you in Tallahassee when Hurricane Michael hit?
I
Years
was
ago?
I was in West Palm Beach.
Okay. My Florida geography is very. Is that Panhandle
straight-
or
straight south.
Okay. So we
Like
have
a bit above Miami.
So we have people who were living in Panama City or even in Mariana, which is like 20, 40 miles inland in a place where you don't expect to be. You can have bad hurricanes there, but you don't expect to have like a catastrophic hurricane.
Mm-hmm.
But it just destroyed this town 40 miles inland, and there are still people who have just moved. I met someone a couple weeks ago who had moved from Mariana and is now homeless living in Tallahassee. It's like we're already feeling, there are already these little micro pockets of climate migration. Like they just don't have a home to go back to, and there's no safety net for them to rely on, and now they're just kind of screwed. And things like that are going to start happening more and more, and maybe we'll have some kind of solution to it, but I'm not optimistic.
So that's it in terms of my question.
Ending on a happy note. Good.
Yes.
Good.
Well,
Good.
this is where I wanted to end. This is kind of like the whole point of my essay.
So can I make a suggestion
Please.
for the essay?
Please.
You have asked a lot of questions that are very, very wide ranging. This is like really, really hard to do, and it's I think the thing that everybody struggles with the most when they're writing. But try to narrow it down a little bit would be my suggestion. Like maybe just talk about climate or just talk about automation, or at least spend the bulk of your time on one thing and then maybe mention others. These are like massive topics that you could write 10,000 pages about any one of the questions that you asked. And it might be helpful if you're like having trouble structuring things to say, okay, I'm just going to focus on like, capitalism's response to climate change, or I'm just going to focus on automation. Hard to do, and you definitely don't have to do that, but that would be my suggestion.
I mean, I definitely think that the more I kind of look at this essay, I really want to focus on automation and climate change the most, and then kind of then have like a big piece of it be what capitalism and any other form of political structure will have in a world with all those problems.
Yeah, just remember you can always write another essay if you won't be able to say everything that you want to say in this one essay, and it's fine if you have a couple paragraphs at the end where you say these are all the things I didn't talk about and want to talk about in the future. I think it's generally better to have like a narrow but like really, really solid piece of writing than like a really broad kind of all over the place piece. But write whatever you feel like, right? Write something that's going to be most enjoyable to write.
Thank you. Yeah, it's pretty stressful because I finally sat down. I had like a draft due Sunday, and it was 1,000 words, and I turned in 200 words. But like, I was like, oh, I really thought I knew so much about this. I am now sitting here completely disillusioned with no idea like how grand this like subject is, and just like I'm like I can't make all these statements like. These are just opinions and stuff like that. It's a bit stressful, but hopefully I'll muscle through it.
Yeah, you'll be fine. How long do they want the final piece to be? 1,000 words?
I believe it's like 3,000
okay.
something like that, 3,200. I really just need to start like pumping out words, just so I can have substance.
This seems like one of those things that once you really get going on it too, you'll. I mean, you have enough to talk about that you'll be able to get the words down.
Yeah, I definitely need to read my articles and just start.
Yeah, honestly, that's the thing that will help you more than anything. It's just read the darn thing.
Yeah.
Like however much conversation you're having, reading like 3 of those articles will probably give you more material to work with than anything else, honestly.
I mean, it's gonna be, I'm gonna try to fill most of the paragraphs with conversation and opinion, and then between all that, kind of just have the articles and their quotes to support it. Again, I just have to read it. Do you mind if I ask who you're voting for?
Who do you think that I'm voting for?
I mean, I would hope Bernie Sanders.
Yeah,
but
it's Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. If Bernie Sanders doesn't get the nominee, who are you voting for?
I don't know. I've been going back and forth on it for a while, but could be I am voting for city commission this year type situation.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
I wish you luck.
Yeah, I'd love to read it once you get it finished. I'm not going to grade you on it or anything, but I'm curious.
I mean, I would always take some criticism or feedback. I'm pretty open to
Interesting, broad topic. So yeah, feel free to send drafts and whatever. Don't have to, but if you feel like it, feel free to.
Please. Thank you so much. Yep. Have a good one. Thank you. You too. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, absolutely.